Welcome to the Happiness Podcast. I'm Dr. Robert Puff. I was at my bank the other day, and while I was working with my teller, I noticed there was a woman beside me who was older, who was having a very difficult time because she wanted to use her debit card and she was having a hard time punching in her code. At my bank, they have these bulletproof shields to protect the people behind the counter, so they could not help her at all. So I went over to her and said, "Can I help you?" And she said, "Yes, I can't punch in my code, it's not working." So she whispered to me her code, I punched it in for her, and it worked immediately. She said, "Thank you so much. I'm partially blind and I have a really hard time seeing things." Everyone was happy and no one was mad at her because they could see that she was older and she was doing her best. She punched it in probably 5 times without it working. So someone could have gotten frustrated with her, but I could tell no one had, and everyone could tell that she just needed some help. And she was ever so thankful for that help. I use this example because we live in a busy world. We're very busy people having a lot of things to do. And when we get behind someone who's moving very slowly, it can be challenging for many of us. We can get upset at them. But I think we all, or at least most of us, when we see it's someone who's struggling, who's older, who in this case, like this woman who had problems seeing, most of us would not get upset at her at all and would probably do our best to help her like I was able to. I think that's a very normal response in this situation. She was slowing up the line. She was making other people wait. But no one got mad at her because they saw that she was doing her best. And she was older, and we learned later that she had a hard time seeing because she shared that with everyone. So no one was upset at her at all, and everyone was glad that she was able to get her transaction done. Of course, there'll be a few people that will be mean no matter what, have no patience even though she had disabilities and would have gotten mad at her, or at least in their heart gotten upset. But I really think that type of behavior is few and far between. When we see people struggling, particularly when we can see reasons for it, we relax, we don't get as upset, and often we even want to help them. But here's my very important question for all of us. Aren't we all usually trying to do our best? Exceptions to the rules, of course, but aren't most of us in that situation where other people are getting upset at us, doing our best? I think we are. I think humans really do try to do their best given their circumstances. Now, sometimes people have very bad circumstances, so their best is very little and minimal, and sometimes their actions are even unkind. But what can help us to not get so upset at them when they are acting in ways that we don't like or ways that we don't understand is beginning to see that they're acting that way because of the difficulties they're having in their life. In many ways, they're crippled emotionally. Sometimes they're having physical problems. It's a plethora of things that can be wrong. And when we see it that way, we stop getting so upset at them, because even when they're doing things that are causing us distress, it allows us to not feel such hatred or anger or be so upset at them, because we realize that in many ways they're doing this behavior because they're crippled, they're struggling with life, and they're taking that out on us because of their pain. I cannot tell you the number of people I've worked with that have gotten divorced and their spouse was in some ways a monster to them. At the time, it was horrifying being with them. But now 5, 10, 20 years later, they just have pity for that person because they realize that person was just crippled. They acted the way they did because of their horrible background that they had. It doesn't excuse what they did to their spouse, but what it does is it helps the people I talk to feel more pity towards the person that hurt them instead of fear or anxiety or even anger. So on the Happiness Podcast, my goal is to teach techniques that can help us live better lives. Well, one of the things I think that makes our lives hard is when we get upset at someone. Whether it's justified or not, it can really put a damper on our day and on our lives because we're feeling such hostility towards another person. And it just makes our day and sometimes our life just not go well. What can help in these situations is when we realize the behavior that they're doing is because of their past and ways that they've been crippled, ways that they're struggling right now, and it's coming out through hurting us or doing things that upset us. And when we see their behavior as that they're crippled people, not that they're people that truly are doing things just to hurt us, we do get calmer. We get less upset because now we attribute a different reason to their behavior. They're not just being jerks. They're not just trying to hurt us. They're not trying to make our day worse. They're struggling. And when we see that, we can relax and go more with the flow. I think a lot of people have this experience, probably most of us. A few out there may not, but I think most of us have had this experience. We're driving and we get behind a really slow person and we're in a hurry and we have no idea why they're going so slowly. There's ample space in front of them. There's no reason they're going at half the speed limit they could be going at. And we may honk at them. We may get really close behind them. We may get up beside them and get aggressive and we're going to tell them off. But then when we get up beside them, it's an elderly person tightly gripping the steering wheel, carefully looking ahead of them and keeping their eyes on the road so they can drive safely. And then all of a sudden, all that anger and frustration with their behavior melts away. And we just get back to driving and feel silly that we got so upset over something like that. So here's the real technique for today, something that we can apply throughout our day when other people make us upset, is stop judging them so harshly and say, for whatever reason, they are doing their best. I may not like their best. I may think their best is really bad, but they are doing their best. And I don't need to let their behavior upset me. I can take a deep breath. I can slow down and just let things go forward. And a lot of times, not by saying anything, not by making any comments, just by being still, everything settles down and goes forward. When someone we love greets us in an unkind way or in a brusque way, and we don't know why, we just get quiet. We listen, and we see what's going on. And almost always there is something going on, and it has nothing to do with us. Sometimes it does. Sometimes we're doing something to upset the other person. Hopefully they'll give us clarification so that we can change our behavior. But mostly, when we get upset, what we can do is relax and realize that people are doing their best. Even when their best is kind of stinky, they're still doing their best. I know that sounds crazy. I know it can be hard to really assimilate this, but what it does is, even if I'm wrong, it allows us to relax, and we won't be getting as upset because we're going to be giving other people a little breathing room, a little bit of space, and we won't be putting up with their shenanigans. When they do things that are hurtful, we just walk away or we don't take it personally because we realize it's not about us. It's something happening inside of them. We don't need to now get upset at them because they perhaps are doing something that feels unkind towards us. We can set boundaries, of course. That's absolutely something good to do. But we don't have to get upset because the upsetness comes from we think they should be doing it differently. And they would be doing it differently if they weren't crippled in some way in their heart. And that's what can help, realizing that when people aren't doing very well, there probably is a very good reason why they're not. We may not know it, we may never know it, but usually there's a very good reason why they're doing what they're doing, even when their behavior is very dark. I mean, think of it this way. Think of one of the most diabolical things that people do to each other. Could you do that ever? Probably not. So if a person were to do something like hurt an innocent child or kill people just randomly without any sense or motive, we would say, wow, how did they do that? We don't need to know. They are crippled in their heart, but that's why they do things that are in some ways diabolical, because they're suffering. They're having a really hard time, and their lives have been miserable, because if we acted like that, we'd be miserable too. And we're not going to act like that. But when we encounter those types of behavior, it is so much easier just to see the person as struggling, as not doing well, and that's the reason why they're acting this way. Not because they're purposely trying to hurt us just to be mean, even if that's what they're doing, but they're doing it because of the pain inside of them. When I was doing my doctorate and had my internship at the VA hospital in Sepulveda, California, and for 1 year I worked in the psychiatric ward for new patients coming in who were struggling with severe psychological issues. They had been murderers, some of them. They'd been in and out of prison. They were living on the street. Some of them were rapists. They had very dark pasts, many of them. Not all, of course. Some of them were beautiful souls that were just struggling, but some had very, very dark pasts. Well, the one thing I learned during that year is even though they did some really things that were sad to other people and themselves, they were not happy campers. And they did them because of their own past, because of the horrors they had in their past. It didn't excuse their behavior, but it did help explain their behavior. And there wasn't one of them that I didn't grow to like and even care for. Even though, like I said, they had some very dark pasts, they all were meaningful souls that I felt care for and even love for. One man who I got to work with quite often was considered by many at the hospital one of the most dangerous human beings out there. And I really grew to like him. One day he came in after he had swallowed a bunch of pills to commit suicide, and I went to visit him in the emergency room because they were pumping his stomach. And it was very hard for him, and I actually just sat with him to be with him because he was alone and no one visited him. And the two of us ended up developing a very close bond the time I was there. I know people in our lives hurt us and do sometimes very horrible things to us and others that we love. And I'm not in any way trying to excuse their behavior. I'm just trying to let it not have so much grip on our hearts that we have so much hatred. Because hatred is really bad for our souls. Being upset at people constantly that we're having a feud with, perhaps it's a relative, perhaps it's a friend. Those upsetnesses that we deal with are hard on us and they exhaust us. If we can realize that other people that aren't doing well because in some way they are crippled emotionally. And if we realize that, I think we'll find that our hearts will soften and all the upsetness in our hearts will just begin to melt away. And instead of fighting life, we'll begin to flow with life because we'll see that life truly is a beautiful adventure, and our purpose here is to live it well, not letting others rob us from our joy, and realizing that when others do things that upset us, it's probably because there's something inside of them that is not doing well. And if we see it that way, we'll find that that upsetness in our hearts will begin to dissipate, and the joy, the peace in our hearts that really is at the bottom, at the core of who we are, will return, and we'll find that life truly is a beautiful adventure. Thank you for joining me on the Happiness Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, please go to happinesspodcast.org. And until next time, accept what is, love what is.